All right, welcome in. It's automotive repair news today, and I think I found someone just like me in the automotive repair industry. I've been doing this podcast for just about a year, and I've been on the search, on the hunt, and I think I found him. It's Josh Parnell. What's up, Josh?
Braxton, thanks for having me, man. I think that might be an understatement. I agree. You and I think, are cut from the same cloth, and I'm happy to be here, and thanks for having me on.
I guess the one caveat to that is I can set up this microphone in my sleep,
Yes.
and you might need a little bit of help with that. But
I
hey, we all have things we're working on.
we do have things we're working on. We're going to go through things, and we're going to grow through things. I think I need a lot of help with this. And the irony is that I have my own podcast, yet I'm one of the least tech savvy people you will ever meet. But thankfully, we got it figured out for today's episode.
And the funny thing is, if you look at your camera, if you're watching this podcast on YouTube, you've got a good mic placement, looks good. The wiring runs well. And then you have a nice setup behind you. I'm sitting in a recliner with a side table. And I mean, everything else you've got going for you.
It it
So
it helps to know people who know things that you don't know. So when I reach out to my guys and they're like, "Hey, get this microphone, get this set up," I just do what they say, and so I'm set up for success now.
hey, you're following instructions. That's
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 it.
like step number one
Yes.
in good leadership, which
There you
is
go.
one of the reasons why I've got Josh on the episode today. And by the way, reason I say that Josh and I are similar is we're both from outside the industry and we've been in for a little while, learning things, growing, enjoying our time, and meeting new people and all this stuff. But still, in the grand scheme of things, don't know a whole lot about the industry. And so excited to have a fellow learned industry person on the
Yes.
podcast
Yeah.
today.
Correct. Yeah. No, and
Um,
and 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 I will say I have it's more so a lack of knowledge on the automotive side, meaning I have industry experience. I'm familiar with the industry, but I'm not really a what you'd call a car guy. And I might be shoot myself in the foot by saying that, but the majority of my clients that I work with as a leadership coach are in the automotive repair industry, which I do have a background in, but every single person that I work with knows way more about cars than I do, and that's why
yeah.
my focus is on people and less about the components and the
Well,
systems of a
I
vehicle.
mean, I think it's great because so many repair shop owners are former technicians. I mean, I don't know
Yes.
the statistics, you probably do, but it's a large majority. And so many of them say after so many months of running my repair shop, I realized I'm not good at XYZ. Usually it's financials, managing people, and usually it's customer service.
Yeah.
And those things don't have to do with turning wrenches. So, I mean, turning wrenches and running a repair shop is helpful, but I know a lot of owners too that didn't come from that, but are excellent at the customer service aspect or managing people, hiring, stuff like that. I mean, so I think it's actually kind of works well because so many of the shop owners that are struggling are the technicians that don't know how to do the things that you're good at in leadership.
Yeah. There's a lot of folks, especially to piggyback on what you're saying, Braxton. A lot of folks who are now shop owners who are former technicians, and what happens is they were a high performing technician, a high performing team member at their location, wherever they were before shop ownership, who've mastered these processes, who've gotten to be a phenomenal technician, and then they either get promoted into a leadership role or they say, you know what, I'm going to step out and do this on my own. I can do this on my own.
Yeah.
So they're going to become an owner. And it's like going from a player to a coach. And that's a massive shift that a lot of
Yeah.
people are not used to undertaking.
Hmm.
And people struggle to stay in the coach's seat because now they see these team members or their players doing these processes that they've mastered. They see them doing them quote unquote incorrectly, or in other words, differently. So they jump out of the coach's seat to go save the day. And so
Yeah.
what happens is that technician is now wearing a different hat than they've been their entire career. They're wearing the ownership hat where they're now leading people and their people should be leading the processes. But then they see these people not leading the processes the way that they used to. So they put on another hat. Now the hats they're wearing is player, coach, counselor, friend, teacher, student, and they find themselves massively overwhelmed. And what I do is I give back time and money to shop owners by saying, hey, give me the opportunity to work with your service managers, to work with your lead technicians, even to work with you on how to lead people and help them maximize their leadership potential.
Is that the thing that you typically find that the shop owner needs the most? Because see, obviously, I can't talk from experience either. I've never been a technician, never worked in a shop. I mean, I've been in plenty in
Mhm.
my last 5 years, but at the same time, I don't have that experience. So, I mean, is that like the thing that you recommend to most is, or see the most is just don't understand how to step away from being a technician or learn how to lead?
Yeah, I see that the most in shop owners, but I even see that the most in service managers. I'd say 80% of my clients are service managers who were former service advisors who got a promotion into a leadership role, and they themselves also struggle to stay in that coach's seat. But when I share with shop owners that it costs you 6 to 9 months of a team member salary to replace them, or if I let you know that poor communication is costing your shop 18% of total salaries being paid out on an annual basis, which means if you're a shop owner paying out $1 million in salary every single year, poor communication across your shop could be creating sunk costs in the amount of 180,000 ish dollars every single year. So what I do with the knowledge and background that I have in the industry, I know enough to be dangerous. I can come into your shop and trust me, you don't want me to come into your shop and try to do your job. I'm going to mess everything up. But what I can do is I can speak to the guest experience and how we treat this as a relationship first. And if we serve our guests, take care of our guest, love on our guest, the transaction is a natural byproduct of exceptional standard setting service. I can
Yeah.
talk about sales and the sales processes that work by providing an educational type of sales process to help
Yeah.
your guest make an informed buying decision. But what I really focus on is how to effectively communicate, how to properly delegate. I work on effective onboarding, proper training, and consistent coaching so that when the leader gets better, everyone gets better.
So I was going to bring that up because I was scrolling through your Facebook page yesterday and
Mhm.
saw that stat. Poor communication is costing shop owners 18% of total salaries being paid out on an annual basis. I mean, that's a pretty big chunk of change. So I mean,
Sure.
like when you say poor communication though, break that down because I think everybody, whether they like it or not, struggles with communication at some level. But when you say poor, what is poor and what kinda leads to that?
That's a great question. We know that when there's a breakdown in communication, voids tend to get created, and oftentimes negativity fills those voids. And we also know that when we're trying to communicate, oftentimes there are actual multiple conversations happening for the one that's really happening, which is the conversation that I'm having, the conversation that you're having, and the conversation I think that we're having, and the conversation that you think that we're having. That's why the greatest misconception about communication is the fact that it's actually happening. Because when we have a meeting, we in our minds believe, okay, I was very clear, I was very direct, it's understood what we're going to be doing moving forward. But after the meeting, there's very little action that often takes place, and that's why I mean, controversial statement, but I often say meetings are a waste of time unless we walk the talk. There's a lot of talk that happens in the meetings. Provide calls to action for your team members. This is one easy way to improve communication. Provide every one of your team members a call to action beyond a team meeting or a one on one. Speaking
Yeah.
of one on ones often don't happen. And what we know is, as shop owners, I want to try to increase my performance, which ultimately increases my revenue. And my focus tends to be on the revenue. I'm increasing numbers. I'm trying to be mindful of KPIs, but I encourage my clients to shift their focus from the end in mind of revenue to the fact that connection creates engagement, and engagement increases performance. There's often an engagement gap that needs to be fixed. And we know this because here's another stat for you: 70% of employees are disengaged at work. And they're disengaged because they don't feel seen, they don't
Mhm.
feel heard, they don't feel valued.
Yeah.
And here's what I mean by this, Braxton. What I try to do for my clients is I try to model for them what it looks like to create two things so that we can provide two things. I want to create safety and trust so that I can provide clarity and direction. And they should be doing this with their team as well. If you think about any job that you've either left or lost, it's very likely that you didn't have both clarity and direction. And one on ones, team meetings, daily huddles. I'm emphasizing the word daily for a reason. It's not just sporadic, they're daily huddles.
Yeah.
These all create engagement, which ultimately increases performance.
Mhm. And I think the key thing is, and I mean, I've felt this in previous jobs myself, and so I can speak from experience in that way. But I think it's important as a manager, and I've never been a manager, so I can't put myself in that shoes. But I've been someone who has been managed by a lot of people,
Mhm.
and I think it's important to know how to manage different types of people because obviously you can't manage one tech the same way as you do the service advisor and so on and so forth. Because I mean, uh, I've had a manager that is really standoffish who not that they're a bad person, but they like to have just the one meeting every now and again to check in.
Mhm.
Um, and then the rest of the week you don't really interact much. And to me, I like to have the pretty constant communication. I'm definitely a verbal. I need somebody to pat me on the back. I need that affirmation kind of
Mhm.
stuff. And so I think that's important too to know as a manager or shop owner that you've got to sort of custom fit some things to certain people and sort of learn what works. And I think most of all, just be honest and know, hey, you just got to have that conversation with everybody in your shop and say, hey, I want to know the best thing that works for you. And because I want
Yes.
you to be comfortable. And so, how do you want this to work? Do you want this to be an everyday deal? Do you want me to check in with you, every couple of hours, even just whatever?
That's so good, man. I mean, you're describing situational leadership, and that's a form of management. And what I work on is leadership, coaching, training, and management for all my clients. And all four are necessary, but all four are different. And
Yeah.
I have methods for all four. But situational leadership is when you're adapting to the needs of a situation and you're adapting to the needs and the abilities of those that you're leading. So you have your own unique leadership style, but the individuals that you're leading are all different. They all have different personalities. They all have different receptive or reception to communication. They all may learn differently than one another. So I like the fact that you're already thinking, hey, I need to ask the question. I need to find out what works best for you. How can I best serve you? How do you like to be led? How do you like to receive feedback?
Yeah.
And or I mean, point blank. And I try to avoid asking a yes or no question, a leading question. So you don't want
Yeah.
to ask,
Right.
do you like to receive feedback? Some people don't really understand what feedback is. Some people receive feedback as criticism, condemnation, and judgment. But other people who recognize you're doing them a disservice by not sharing feedback with them, they recognize, you know what? I'm being coached. And
Yeah.
coaching is feedback. Coaching is not criticizing someone, condemning them, judging them. And oftentimes that's what someone feels like if they don't know where you're coming from to begin with. And this is where you get to create the safety and trust to provide the clarity and direction.
So, I mean, obviously, this is an automotive repair news podcast. I cover like the news that's happening in the industry. And I don't often talk about stuff like this because, there are a number of shop owners that know that what's happening is important,
Hmm.
like the news, but don't like keeping up or don't really care. While it is important to know so you can stay up to date on things happening in your repair shop. But knowing all that stuff in the grand scheme of things, even the type of business you run, the type of shop management system, all this and that really isn't that important when it comes down to this type of stuff. When you're running the repair shop, the leadership qualities that you exceed on and things you need to work on, those are really key. And I don't really talk about them a whole lot. So uh, for that shop owner that doesn't always follow the news all that well, but is listening to this episode because it's talking about shop coaching and leadership,
Hmm.
what are some of those key things that you see in your mind that outside of the news of the day is really important that maybe should be newsworthy as a shop owner?
I think I shared a couple of them. I mean, to me, the stats that I shared are should be eye opening to a shop owner when you know that it costs you 6 to 9 months of a team member's salary to replace somebody. This is where effective onboarding, proper training, and consistent coaching come into play. I'd ask myself if I'm a shop owner listening, what does my onboarding process look like? How many team members did I have to replace in 2024, or any year for that matter? What is my retention? numbers look like, and figure out, why am I losing good quality team members, whether I'm letting them go or whether they're going on their own accord. Why am I losing team members to begin with? And this is why I encourage exit interviews if and when it does happen. They're not fun, but they're necessary. It gives you insight into things that you might be blinded to. And to me, if I'm listening, I'm thinking, this all sounds great. I get it. Communication's important. Delegation's important. I got players and coaches across my shop. Time management is certainly an opportunity area for everyone, because none of us, quote unquote, have that time. I'd often encourage you to ask yourself, am I making that time? Am I making the time for my team members who are giving me 50, 60 plus hours per week, every single week? Can I make the time to have a meaningful conversation with them? I shared earlier that 70% of employees are disengaged at work, but conversely speaking, 80% of people will tell you that they are fully engaged if they receive meaningful feedback at least one time per week. And meaningful
Hmm.
feedback could be in a form of a 5-minute conversation from their employer. You said it yourself. You're a words of affirmation guy. You
Yeah.
like the communication. You want to make sure that you are regularly um, communicating with your, not only your employer, but I would likely just I'd venture to guess your employees as well. You like being on the same page.
Hmm.
And this is something that we have to remember. Even though I have my own unique leadership style, everyone else around me is different in their own regards as well. How am I going to grow and develop that person? The leader is focused on influencing to grow and develop people around them. And that's where we need to shift our focus from connection before content, from people before process, people before profit.
So, limitless leadership is your deal. Leadership is important. We've been talking about it. So, how long have you been doing this in the repair industry?
I've been in the industry for about a decade. So I
Okay.
began my career in the industry in summer of 2015, when I was hired on as a trainer at Christian Brothers Automotive. And so a couple years later, had the opportunity to lead that department, and eventually led an entire training department. Grew the department from one program and one other person to 6 programs and 7 other people, and including a leadership development program. And so I've coached and trained thousands of service managers, service advisors, and at the time, franchisees within that organization across 31 states and over 300 locations nationwide. And then I jumped into this terrifying world of entrepreneurship about almost 2 years ago, and now have coached roughly 150 people in the last couple of
Okay.
years in
So
the automotive industry space.
so in 2 years, I guess the reason I asked that was,
Yeah.
you've been around the block a little bit to know that leadership is important. Yeah, you know that. But
Hmm.
where is this industry at in leadership? Do we have a leadership issue? Because depending on who you talk to, this industry sucks, or this industry is awesome.
Yeah.
It's recession proof. We'll see if it's Trump tariff proof.
Yeah.
Uh, but it, do we have a leadership issue? Is that one of the things that this industry needs to improve on?
Yes, we do. But I will say this industry isn't an anomaly. Every industry has a leadership issue, because the stats I
Because there
shared
are some
earlier.
shops that do it well. Like, I'm not saying
Correct.
that nobody does it right, but as a majority, is that a
Sure.
problem?
Yeah, it is. And the shops that do well, the first thing I'd ask you to look at is their culture. Describe what their culture looks like. It's very likely that they are moving and operating like a well-oiled machine. They have standard operating procedures. They have an effective onboarding process. The training works, and it's not a one-time a year, a once a year thing. Oftentimes, we hear someone say, "Well, I sent my team to training 2 years ago." Training should be treated like an athlete treats practice.
Yeah.
And so coaching, what does coaching look like? And I'm not even necessarily saying go out and hire a coach. Are you coaching your team members, and vice versa? So yes, to answer your question, there is a leadership issue, and I believe a lot of it has to do with time. Time is one of the biggest challenges we all have, especially in this industry, because it's a grind. I mean, it is a grind working at an automotive repair shop. Long hours, a lot going on. There's a When I say moving like a well-oiled machine, that's necessary for growth and development, including in addition to the success you're going to achieve as a result of it. So when I say make the time, that's a massive understatement. You've got to make the time for your people. Your people are your greatest assets. And so change that 70% of disengaged employees, change that number around to 100% of your employees are fully engaged because they feel seen, because they feel heard, because they feel valued, is because of the way you're showing up for people. And one of my favorite quotes, Braxton, is from Maya Angelou. She says, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." And
Mhm.
at the end of the day, the way you're making your team members feel, whether you're an owner, a manager, a technician, across the board, you have influence at your shop, but you have the ability to make someone feel a certain kind of way that's going to prompt engagement and subsequently increase that performance.
Yeah. I mean, I love this, and we'll end here. But I found this stat, and I like that we're using stats because I think yeah, obviously they can be skewed, and you can make them say about
Mhm.
whatever you want. But some of
Sure.
these are really important. Um, 84% of shops with an annual revenue above 1 million reported working with a business coach. And this is not an ad for limitless leadership, but I think it is an ad for seeking out a coach because if you want to be successful, most successful shops have some sort of person who helps give them the direction.
Yeah. Love
Um,
that.
and this stuff is really good. It helps keep you grounded. So,
Well, and Braxton, I'll say this too. I'm glad you shared that stat, and you're right. This is not a plug for limitless leadership, I'm a big believer in coaching in general. If you're looking for a coach, I would find out who's coaching your coach. I work with a counselor once a month. I work with my own coach twice a month. I'm even married to a licensed professional counselor, so I get free counseling even when I don't want it, which is all the time.
hey,
But I,
well,
but I
that's
need
true
it.
whether or not that
Yeah, right.
person is licensed.
Yeah, exactly. But we all need it, and we all need to receive it because we all have blind spots. And if you're listening and you're saying, "Hey, Josh, that's great, but I don't have blind spots," that's a blind spot.
Yeah,
And
right.
who is coaching your coach? I'd find out from that. And I'm a
Yeah.
big believer in collaboration, not competition. Interview different people. Limitless leadership may not be the coaching service for you, but there's someone out there who's going to help you grow and develop your business, and that's really the ultimate goal to begin with. So find someone who you're willing to allow to speak truth into your life.
And among those surveyed, 84% of shops
Okay,
inside that 84, 54% exceed 2.5 million in annual revenue. So,
that's incredible.
want to be successful, find someone help you get there.
There you
So,
go.
that's newsworthy. This is Automotive Repair News Today with Josh Parnell. Thanks, man.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, if you're still here, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Automotive Repair News Today. If you enjoyed the show, please take a moment, like, share, subscribe to the podcast. It'll help us out a big deal and help grow the show. And you know what? While you're at it, slap on a review too if you feel like this content is helpful for the industry. Don't forget to follow us on all your favorite social media platforms. We're on Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. Stay connected and be the first to know about new episodes, behind the scene content, and more. And until next time, let's make the industry better together.